institution.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Ukrainian drone attacks target Moscow overnight, with Russia saying air defences shoot down several drones and no immediate damage reported in the capital. Debris from a downed drone sparks a fire at an industrial site in the Tula region, as Moscow says more than 170 Ukrainian drones are intercepted across Russia. The US State Department says it will deny visas to 5 people, including a former EU commissioner, accusing them of pressuring American social media platforms to suppress certain viewpoints. The former EU tech chief rejects the claims as a witch hunt. Venezuela tells the UN Security Council that the United States is waging an unofficial war to remove its government and pursue what it calls continental ambitions across Latin America. Caracas warns it is only the first target of a broader strategy. Thailand and Cambodia agree to hold a meeting of defence officials to try and revive months-old ceasefire talks as border fighting enters a third week with at least 80 dead. The US Supreme Court refuses to let President Donald Trump deploy National Guard troops to the Chicago area. The justices leave in place a lower court order blocking the deployment. Belgium formally joined South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice, alleging Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza Strip. The court says Belgium has filed a declaration of intervention in the proceedings. Libya's army chief of staff dies after a private jet crashes following a departure from Turkey. The Prime Minister calls it a major loss for both the military and the nation. New South Wales passes sweeping new gun and anti-terror laws in an emergency parliamentary sitting following the Bondi Beach mass shooting. Now, those are the top headlines for the hour, but we move on to our coverage of the release of the Epstein files, and newly released documents from the files reveal a series of controversial emails, including from an individual known as A, who wrote to Ghislaine Maxwell asking for what they call inappropriate friends. The email, sent from Balmoral Castle in 2001, is part of a wider batch of over 11,000 files made public today. The documents also show Maxwell discussing a trip to Peru with what the emails called the Invisible Man and forwarding details to Prince Andrew's team. Although Andrew Mountbatten is named, the documents don't suggest any criminal activity. However, a request from the US Department of Justice to interview Prince Andrew in 2020 highlights his possible connection to Epstein's ongoing investigations. The release also mentions US President Donald Trump's links to Epstein, noting that he flew on Epstein's private jet more times than 9 in the 1990s. However, both Trump and Andrew have denied any wrongdoing. Joining us now is Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar. He's an international relations and defense expert. He joins us live from New Delhi. A further tranche of emails, documents, videos, audio clips have been released, Dr. Kochar, and of course some things are obviously hard to pick out as criminal actions are wise. Pretty elusive stuff being released here. However, this is the largest Epstein document released yet. It once again is heavily redacted, but we have some hints and clues about Epstein's inner circle, some of which we already knew, of course. The involvement of Prince Andrew, we knew that they were very closely affiliated, as well as current President Donald Trump. Do you think the DOJ's approach to this release of the Epstein files applies with the spirit of this new law, which obviously ordered for the release and complete transparency of these files?
Uh, Thank you, Thomas. I think to some extent, the Department of Justice is justified in releasing these files in tranches because it's quite a voluminous kind of a thing, and therefore they are releasing these are in batches. But what is important here is that it is linking some of the major personalities in countries like former Prince Andrew, Mountbatten Windsor, and Donald Trump's also disclosures are there on this file. So I think one thing is very clear. There is going to be an established nexus between Epstein's jet, how these people have traveled, in what capacity have they traveled, what was the agenda of their traveling in such a clandestine manner. Because normally, if you are onto a private jet of a specific person, and if you are a, a person of eminence, it is going to raise questions on the integrity. Because here I would like to mention this word integrity, because in any kind of assignment or a position of authority which you hold, there is a integrity involved, and you are jeopardizing or compromising this integrity. So I think from that point of view, these Epstein files are very, very relevant. And secondly, that it also is contradicting some statements made by these leaders, especially President Trump, when he mentioned that a specific number of times he has gone 8 times or something. But it has been mentioned here in these files that he has gone more than 8 times, 9 times, and things like that. So that is also a credibility factor is also coming in. One is integrity, the second is credibility, and some kind of investigation will be required subsequently after these files have been actually released. That what was the purpose of the visit? Was it a totally a private visit, and why was it undertaken on a private jet? And what was the family also, I believe, has traveled. Trump's family has also traveled on this jet. So, what was the you are they actually connected to any of the favors being actually given for traveling in this manner, or was it a clandestine visit which was not supposed to be known to people? So all these are searching questions, I think, and they would demand answers in time to come.
Yes, and of course, this has sparked bipartisan outrage throughout the United States. Of course, this Epstein Files Transparency Act was passed through Congress with Donald Trump's support. Do you think the American public will be satisfied by some of the outcomes here? Of course, we've had no real new revelations when it comes to who was associated with Epstein. There is no pointing fingers from the Department of Justice. It really is just information which the public is left with to figure out for themselves, to speculate. Do you believe that Donald Trump has silenced people who had this huge critique about the fact that he wasn't releasing these files? Do you think this will satisfy the public, especially, of course, with the redactions as well?
The larger point here is that I think the questions which you have raised are very relevant. The larger point here is that is a Department of Justice going to release all files, or it is going to be trying to scrutinize those files which may cause damage to President Trump, and may be suppressed. So that would be the one part of the I mean, answer which the people of the United States would like to know. The second is that the Department of Justice has also made a statement that all documents in the batch are not verified as factuals. So that means that verification part is, I think, Department of Justice would like to communicate to the people that what facts have been verified to be true and what facts have been verified to be false, because this kind of transparency is important. Otherwise, it is creating a sensational headline or disputed claims where high profile individuals are involved. So I think it is also a clarification required to clear them of their character assassination if it is there in this particular case. So I think from that point of view, the people of United States would like to know the truth, would like to know the verifiable facts with regard to this information which is being released in tranches by the Department of Justice.
And Dr. Kochar, of course, the reason why this was such a bipartisan issue is because, of course, Donald Trump's appearance constantly with Jeffrey Epstein was raising Democrat alarms. And you, of course, have the Epstein issue, which is a conspiracy theory goldmine. Of course, conspiracy theory now at the forefront of the Republican movement in the United States. Without a clear explanation of what happened, who with, along with these redactions, you're saying you don't think Donald Trump will shake this scandal off, as it satisfies neither side?
You see, that I think only time will tell, because if this translates into a scandal, because right now it is not translated into a scandal because information, first of all, has not been verified. And secondly, that it has not all information has come out. And second important aspect is that uh, Donald Trump would also be keen that his name is cleared of all these things. He would also like to see from the Department of Justice those kind of statements which would be emanating to clear his role or his involvement, if any, with regard to conflict of interest. Because here I would like to bring in this word conflict of interest, because conflict of interest is a very important aspect, and which any president of the United States would not like this particular thing to be stuck on his name. So I think in a matter of a few days it will be very, very clear, and President Trump would like to clear off his name as far as the Epstein files are concerned.
Yes, Dr. Kochar, stay with us as we move over to Europe for our next story. And tragedy has struck Moscow today as an explosion has killed 3 people, including 2 police officers. Authorities say 2 traffic officers approached a suspicious individual near a police car on Yezetskaya Street. As they tried to detain him, an explosive device went off and the officers were killed along with a civilian nearby. This deadly blast comes just 2 days after a senior Russian general, Lieutenant General Fanil Salvatorov, was killed in a car bombing in the capital. The investigative committee has opened a criminal case into the attack on the police officers. Dr. Kochar joins us once again. Of course, we can't speculate as of yet about who carried out this attack, the particular motive. However, what does it say about intelligence operating in the Russian capital? Of course, the Russian Secret Service prides itself as being one of the best in the world. Just 2 days after a major general general lieutenant was killed in the capital, the same thing happens around the same site. Is this a big embarrassment for Moscow?
Certainly, it is a big embarrassment because in a capital, if such a senior officer has been targeted, there is bound to be somebody who was planning this entire thing, because this entire thing is planned. It's explosive device, and the person who has detonated it, he has to be an expert in this kind of ammunition knowledge. And secondly, that so far nobody has claimed the responsibility of this blast. So, a larger question is, first of all, there has been intelligence failure because the Russian intelligence agency, KGB, and other agencies have not been able to, pinpoint, or have not been able to investigate, or not been able to uh, forecast uh, this kind of incident in which a senior army officer has been assassinated. And the second important aspect is that presently multiple lines of inquiries are being investigated upon. Uh, Kiev has not officially claimed the responsibility, but normally, if you would have seen the past incidents which have been taking place in Moscow, other areas where Ukraine was involved, their security services have been involved, they have normally acknowledged whenever they carry out this operation. But in this particular operation, what I'm seeing is uh, 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 they have not acknowledged. And you see this trend. This killing is the third assassination of a Russian journal within about a year. So, previous bombings also we actually saw pointed to the involvement of a Ukrainian establishment. So, and these attacks were quite similar. So, if you look at these three incidents which have happened in the last 1 year, these attacks have been quite similar, but the modus operandi has been practically the same. So I won't be surprised that the finger of suspicion goes on the Ukrainian security agencies in this case, though of course they haven't actually claimed the responsibility. So let us see how the investigation of the Russian intelligence goes into this particular aspect, and what has been the cause. Was it other than the Ukrainians? Because that's also an angle which they will like to see, that what was the track record of this general? Was he a kind of an anti-establishment, or was it the handiwork of the Russian, themselves? So all these are very open-ended questions, I would like to say, because when an investigation is going on, you cannot discount any of the angles and any of the possibilities. So I think
Yes.
in a matter of days, the intelligence agencies will be able to figure it out.
Yes, Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. We now move over to Southeast Asia for our next story, and Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to hold a meeting of defence officials towards resuming the months-old ceasefire as the fierce border fighting between them has entered the third week, killing at least 80 people so far. The decision was taken during a special meeting in Kuala Lumpur of Southeast Asian foreign ministers who were trying to salvage a truce first brokered by ASEAN chair Malaysia and US President Donald Trump after a previous round of deadly clashes in July. Thailand and Cambodia have engaged in daily exchanges of rockets and artillery along their 817-kilometre land border following the collapse of the truce, with fighting at multiple points stretching from forested regions near Laos to the coastal provinces of the Gulf of Thailand. Joining us now is Collins Chong Yu Keat, a foreign affairs, security and strategy analyst, joining us live from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Of course, this comes 3 weeks after this fighting broke out once again over a landmine incident. And previously, even when Donald Trump announced another ceasefire on Truth Social, Thailand and Cambodia both came out and said that they weren't going to abide to it. However, now they are agreeing to talk again today. However, fighting has intensified. What's actually different this time, and what could make a ceasefire stick?
Well, these defense talks, they signal damage control, and we have seen how both sides now recognize the escalating cost of escalation. Now that the cost of this escalation have outweighed the benefits, and this is about containment, and of course it's not at the stage of reconciliation. So we have seen how this is in the category of defense level talk, and it's not politically substantive, and this is being treated as a security and command control problem. So this allows both sides to de-escalate quietly without the baggage of political calculations, to avoid nationalist backlash both at home, and of course also to preserve the needed leverage, the opening, of course also the political phase needed to ensure that both sides have the on-the-ground will and capacity to de-escalate quietly. So we can expect some coordination in terms of potential ceasefire, and to resume communication hotlines, as well as of course also to have these kind of new mechanisms for troop disengagement. But we should be realistic and practical enough not to expect any kind of talks on border settlements, on legal resolutions and all that. So this is about buying time. It's not about buying peace. And both sides now recognize the increasing cost and risk of letting this escalate freely. So this is what we have seen now: the capacity and the pressure that have been sent to both sides to at least resume talks at the military level, and to of course explore the possibility of immediate ceasefire in the days to come.
Yeah, and this deal, or these talks, emerged from a special ASEAN meeting in Kuala Lumpur, a bloc that's been heavy with scrutiny. Does this show ASEAN still holds relevance?
Well, as I've argued before, that again, time and time again, this has exposed the structural and systemic weaknesses of ASEAN. This weak crisis management mechanism. ASEAN doesn't have the enforcement capability, and is still being trapped by its own internal mantra of non-interference and the focus on diplomatic approach. And we have seen that to have failed before in the case of Myanmar, and this time he has failed again in the case of Thailand and Cambodia. And this reinforced the perception that ASEAN is reactive in nature, it's not preventive in nature. So he has no deterrent capacity, unlike what Washington has to offer in terms of pressure on both sides. And both Thailand and Cambodia have not been relying so much on ASEAN to offer the needed economic buffer, or the needed pressure being sent by ASEAN, because ASEAN to them simply does not have the needed capacity to compel both sides to come to this agreement. And it is out of their own, again, the internal factor in both Thailand and Cambodia have driven this conflict also. And so far we have failed to see any kind of substantive and and credible and effective measures being sent by ASEAN. And again, we will need the external intervention, external pressure, and that will only come with the credible pressure and the non-conventional approach by Trump and by Washington to ensure that both sides comply at least with the call to de-escalate and to prevent escalation of the crisis.
What pressure exactly does Washington have over Bangkok and Phnom Penh in this border conflict?
Well, we have seen how, in the early phases of the timeline, what Trump has, offered in terms of also projecting this new positive future outline for both nations, especially to Thailand, in terms of greater economic support, in terms of greater, calculations in terms of tariff measures. But again, at the same time, also we have seen how Thailand especially has been also relying quite a bit on the security umbrella of the US, and that is also part of the equation where, with this Trump, approach, we have seen how the increasing, factor, the interlink factor between economic support as well as the security umbrella being provided to this part of the world, especially to Thailand. And of course, also the internal factor plays a huge role here in terms of how, the need to appease the local sentiments. And of course also we have seen how this explosion of domestic sentiments, especially in Thailand, to repel this external pressure or external interference, especially by both ASEAN, or in the case Malaysia has been the mediator, as well as the interference by the US. and that would need to be balanced carefully by the current administration of Thailand. But again, ASEAN has been weak, and there's no other credible intervention or support needed, except only from Washington. So that's how Trump sees this, and now that China is trying to increase its own presence and credibility in terms of this crisis management, but there's no other force that can compel both sides other than Washington in terms of economic offering, in terms of security offering, and China is trying to fill that gap, but it has not been that effective so far, and I don't foresee any kind of profound role being played by Beijing here, except only, of course, the double down by Trump can only work from here, and of course with support and help from ASEAN and Malaysia.
Collins, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. And Pope Leo has expressed his disapproval over Russia's rejection of calls for a ceasefire, calling it a great sorrow. Speaking about ongoing conflicts around the world, Pope Leo said that he hopes he will be heard and there will be 24 hours and 1 day of peace throughout the world. The Russia-Ukraine war continues into its 4th year of full-scale conflict, with intense fighting in eastern Ukraine, significant territorial shifts and high-level diplomatic efforts to broker a peace deal. As per reports, Ukrainian forces confirmed their withdrawal from the strategic town of Siversk in the Donetsk region. Russia now controls approximately 20% of Ukrainian territory, including nearly 99% of Luhansk and 75% of the Donetsk. Meanwhile, listen in to what the Pope had to say about the ongoing conflicts.
Veramente delle cose che mi causano molto tristezza in questi giorni è il fatto che apparentemente la Russia ha rifiutato la richiesta di una tregua di Natale. Io faccio ancora una volta questa richiesta a tutte le persone di buona volontà, rispettare almeno nella festa della nascita del Salvatore un giorno di pace. Magari ci ascoltino e che ci sia 24 ore, un giorno di pace in tutto il mondo. Grazie.
We move from the Vatican to the United States, and the US announced a ban on all newly manufactured foreign drones, citing national security risks. This decision specifically targets Chinese drone makers like DG, which dominate the US market. The Federal Communications Commission says those drones pose unacceptable risks to security, particularly with upcoming major events like the 2026 World Cup and 2028 Olympics. DG, which controls 80% of the US drone market, expressed disappointment over the move, calling it protectionist. Some US businesses who rely on Chinese drones worry this could hurt their operations. However, industry leaders argue it's time for the US to build its own domestic drone industry. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.